The train's whistle screamed through the mountain pass as Helena Owens pressed her gloved hand against the cold window, watching the landscape change from familiar rolling hills to dense forests she had never seen before. She was supposed to be arriving in Centralia, Oregon, where her cousin's husband had promised her a position as a schoolteacher. But when the conductor called out, "Centralia, Washington Territory, last stop," her heart dropped into her stomach like a stone down a well. "Excuse me," she said, rushing toward the conductor as passengers began gathering their belongings. "I need to get to Centralia, Oregon. When does this train continue south?" The weathered man looked at her with sympathy that made her stomach twist. "Miss, this line doesn't go to Oregon. You needed the Southern Pacific out of Portland. This here's the Northern Pacific, and Centralia's the end of the line for today." Helena felt the blood drain from her face. She had been so careful, checking her ticket 3 times before boarding in Chicago, but somewhere along the journey through multiple transfers and connections, she had gotten on the wrong train. Now she stood in a logging town in Washington Territory with $17 to her name, a trunk full of teaching supplies, and absolutely no idea what to do next. The platform was busy with workers and families, the air thick with the smell of fresh-cut timber and wood smoke. It was late September 1883, and the afternoon sun was already starting to sink behind the tall pines that surrounded the town. Helena stepped onto the platform, her dark blue traveling dress gathering dust, her carefully pinned auburn hair coming loose after 2 days of travel. She was 22 years old, had never been west of Illinois before last week, and was now completely, utterly lost. "Need help with that trunk, miss?" A young porter approached, but Helena shook her head, not wanting to spend money she might desperately need. She managed to drag it to the edge of the platform and sat down on it, trying not to cry. She would not cry. Her mother had always said that Owens women were made of stronger stuff than tears. "You look about as lost as a calf in a blizzard." The voice was deep and warm, touched with amusement but not unkindness. Helena looked up and found herself staring at a man who seemed to have stepped directly out of one of the dime novels her younger brother used to hide under his bed. He was tall, with broad shoulders that filled out a work-worn flannel shirt, and he wore dusty chaps over his trousers like he had just come from riding. His hat was pushed back enough that she could see dark hair and eyes the color of strong coffee. He looked to be in his mid-20s, with the kind of sun-weathered face that spoke of long days outdoors. "I got on the wrong train," Helena said, then immediately felt foolish for admitting it to a complete stranger. "Well, that much is clear," he said, but his smile took any sting from the words. "Where were you aiming to go?" "Centralia, Oregon. I have a teaching position waiting for me there, or at least I hope it is still waiting." She stood up, brushing dust from her skirts, trying to regain some dignity. "I will figure something out. Thank you for your concern." "Hold on now," he said as she tried to lift her trunk. "Centralia's a good 150 miles south of here, maybe more. The next train that could get you headed that direction would not come through until Thursday at the earliest, and you would have to go back north to Tacoma first, then catch another line south." Helena calculated quickly in her head. That would be 4 days. 4 days of lodging and meals she could not afford. "I see. Then I suppose I will have to find work here until I can earn enough to continue my journey." The cowboy, for that was clearly what he was despite being in logging country, tilted his head and studied her with an intensity that made her feel like he could see right through her brave words to the panic beneath. "Or maybe fate brought you to the right man. I beg your pardon." He extended his hand. "Graham Vance. I run a horse ranch about 5 miles outside of town. My sister Molly has been running the household since our mother passed 2 years ago, but she just got married last month and moved to Seattle with her husband. I have been trying to find someone to help keep house, do some cooking, maybe teach my nephew his letters. The boy's 8 and sharp as a tack, but I am not much good with book learning. Helena stared at his outstretched hand, her mind racing. Everything she had been taught about propriety screamed that she should not even consider such an arrangement, alone on a ranch with a strange man. But everything practical in her nature, the part that had helped her family survive after her father died when she was 16, told her this might be her only real option. "I could pay you fair wages," Graham continued, apparently reading her hesitation as financial rather than moral. $20 a month plus room and board. You could save up enough to get to Oregon in a few months, or—" He paused, then finished, "or you might find you like it here in Centralia." "I do not even know you," Helena said, but her hand had already moved toward his as if her body was making decisions her mind had not yet agreed to. "That is fair. How about this, Miss Owens, Helena Owens? Miss Owens, how about you come meet my nephew and see the place before you decide? It is getting late, and you will need somewhere to stay tonight regardless. There is a boarding house in town run by Mrs. Patterson. She is respectable as Sunday church and probably has a room. You can stay there tonight, and tomorrow I will take you out to the ranch. If you do not like what you see, I will pay for your room until the Thursday train and give you enough to get to Oregon. If you do like it, you can start work and earn your way south or stay as long as you want." Fair. It was more than fair. It was suspiciously generous, and Helena had learned long ago that when something seemed too good to be true, it usually was. But as she looked into Graham Vance's steady brown eyes, she did not see deception or ulterior motives. She saw straightforward honesty and maybe a hint of desperation that matched her own. "Why are you being so kind to a complete stranger?" she asked. Graham's smile turned a bit rueful. "Because I am in a bind, Miss Owens, same as you. My nephew Tommy has been running wild since Molly left, and the ranch is falling apart because I am spending all my time trying to keep him out of trouble and burn dinner at the same time. I need help, and you need work. Sometimes things just line up the way they are supposed to." Helena took his hand. It was calloused and strong, the hand of someone who worked hard every day of his life. "All right, Mr. Vance. I will look at your ranch tomorrow, but I am keeping my trunk with me at the boarding house." "Would not have it any other way," he said, and picked up her trunk like it weighed nothing. "Come on. I will introduce you to Mrs. Patterson. She has known me since I was in short pants, so she can vouch that I am not some scoundrel trying to take advantage of a lady in distress." As they walked down the main street of Centralia, Helena took in her surroundings with sharp attention. The town was bigger than she had expected, with a main street lined with false-fronted buildings that housed a general store, a bank, a saloon, a hotel, and various other businesses. Everything was built from the seemingly endless supply of timber that came from the surrounding forests. Men in work clothes walked the wooden sidewalks, and she could hear the distant sound of saws from what must be a lumber mill. "Is this mainly a logging town?" she asked. "Logging and ranching both," Graham replied. "The valley opens up south of here, good grazing land. My father started the ranch 20 years ago when this was barely a settlement. We raise horses mostly, some cattle. Good money in horses these days with all the new ranches starting up further east." Mrs. Patterson's boarding house was a neat, 2-story building painted white with green shutters. The proprietress herself was a sturdy woman in her 50s with iron-gray hair and sharp blue eyes that took in every detail of Helena's appearance in approximately 3 seconds. "Graham Vance, who is this young lady and why are you carrying her trunk?" she demanded, hands on her hips. "Mrs. Patterson, this is Miss Helena Owens. She got on the wrong train and ended up here instead of Oregon. I am hoping she might consider helping out at the ranch, but she needs a respectable place to stay while she makes up her mind. You have any rooms available?" Mrs. Patterson's expression softened immediately. "Oh, you poor dear. Yes, I have a room on the second floor, nice and quiet. $2 a week, meals included. And do not you worry about being alone with this one." She jerked her thumb at Graham. "He is one of the good ones, even if he does have more horses than sense." "I will take that as a compliment," Graham said dryly. He set Helena's trunk down in the front hall. "Miss Owens, I will come by around 9 tomorrow morning if that suits you. We can ride out to the ranch and you can meet Tommy." "I do not have a riding habit," Helena said, suddenly aware of all the things she had not packed for a life in the wilderness. "Can you ride?" "I grew up on a farm in Illinois. I can ride, but not in this dress." Graham considered for a moment. "Molly left some of her things behind. She was about your size. I will bring a split skirt and some boots. Sound good?" It should have felt too intimate, wearing a strange woman's clothes, making plans with a man she had met less than an hour ago. But something about Graham Vance made her feel safe in a way she could not quite explain. Maybe it was the way Mrs. Patterson clearly trusted him. Or maybe it was the genuine relief in his eyes when she nodded her agreement. After Graham left, Mrs. Patterson showed Helena to a small but clean room with a bed covered in a patchwork quilt, a washstand, and a window that looked out over the street. As Helena unpacked a few necessities from her trunk, the older woman lingered in the doorway. "He is a good man," Mrs. Patterson said quietly. "Lost his parents young, raised his sister and nephew after his brother died in a logging accident. Works himself half to death keeping that ranch going. If he is offering you a position, it is because he genuinely needs help, not for any improper reasons." "His nephew," Helena said carefully. "His brother's son, James, was Graham's older brother. He and his wife Sarah both died when a fever swept through 4 years back. Tommy was just 4 years old. Graham took him in without a second thought, raised him alongside Molly until she married." Mrs. Patterson shook her head. "That boy has had more responsibility than most men twice his age." After Mrs. Patterson left, Helena sat on the bed and tried to make sense of her situation. This morning she had woken up on a train, certain of her destination and her future. Now she was in a town she had never heard of, considering a position that would take her further from her original plan. But as she looked out the window at the deepening twilight, watching the lamps being lit along the street, she felt something unexpected. Not fear or regret, but possibility. Maybe Graham Vance was right. Maybe fate had brought her to exactly where she needed to be. She slept better than she had in weeks. The next morning, Helena dressed in her second-best day dress, a practical brown cotton that she had made herself. She braided her hair and pinned it up neatly, then went down to breakfast in Mrs. Patterson's dining room. There were 4 other boarders, all men who worked at the lumber mill, and they were polite enough but clearly surprised to see a young woman at the table. Graham arrived exactly at 9, driving a sturdy wagon pulled by 2 beautiful bay horses. He had cleaned up since yesterday, his face freshly shaved, his hair still damp. He wore a clean shirt and vest, though his boots and chaps showed honest wear. "Morning, Miss Owens," he said, tipping his hat. "Ready to see the place?" She climbed up onto the wagon seat, accepting his hand for balance. He had brought a bundle wrapped in brown paper which he handed to her once they were underway. "Molly's things," he explained. "There is a split skirt, a shirt that might fit, and some boots. You can change when we get to the ranch before you meet Tommy. He is at home with my ranch hand's wife, Betty. She has been watching him in the mornings, but she has 3 little ones of her own and cannot keep it up much longer. The ride out of town took them through beautiful country. The road followed a river that ran clear and cold, and the forest gradually gave way to open meadows surrounded by timber. Helena could see mountains in the distance, their peaks still holding snow even in September. "It is beautiful here," she said, and meant it. "It grows on you," Graham replied. "When my father first brought us out here, I was 12 and I thought he had lost his mind. Why would anyone leave good farmland in Missouri for this wilderness? But he saw something in this land, the potential in it. He was right. You must miss him. Every day. Lost him when I was 19. Hart just gave out one morning while he was working with the horses. Mama followed him 2 years later. Doctors said it was pneumonia, but Molly and I always thought she died of a broken heart." He was quiet for a moment, then added, "That is when I understood why he had loved this place so much. It is hard country, but it is honest. It asks a lot of you, but it gives back fair." They turned off the main road onto a smaller track that wound through a meadow. Ahead, Helena could see buildings, a main house with a porch that wrapped around 2 sides, a large barn, several outbuildings, and fenced pastures where horses grazed in the morning sun. It was not grand, but it was solid and well kept, the kind of place built to last. As they pulled up to the house, a small whirlwind came flying off the porch. A boy with dark hair and Graham's brown eyes came running, followed by a plump woman wiping her hands on her apron. "Uncle Graham, you have been gone forever. Did you bring supplies? Can we go check the traps today?" The words tumbled out in an excited rush. "Tommy, slow down," Graham said, but he was grinning as he climbed down from the wagon. "I brought someone I want you to meet. This is Miss Owens. She might be staying with us for a while." Tommy looked at Helena with frank curiosity. "Are you going to be like Aunt Molly? She used to make good biscuits before she left and married stupid Harold." "Tommy," Graham said warningly, but Betty laughed. "He is not wrong about Harold being a bit dull," she said, then extended a flour-dusted hand to Helena. "Betty Crawford. My husband Luke works the ranch with Graham. It is good to meet you, miss. This place has needed a woman's touch, something fierce." Helena shook her hand, liking the woman immediately. "It is good to meet you, too. And I make excellent biscuits, Tommy, though I cannot promise they are as good as your Aunt Molly's." "Can you make pie?" Tommy asked, which seemed to be the truly important question. "I can make 7 different kinds of pie." Tommy turned to Graham with the kind of serious expression only an 8-year-old could muster. "Uncle Graham, we should definitely keep her." Everyone laughed, and Helena felt some of her nervousness ease. Betty showed her inside while Graham and Tommy went to tend to the horses. The house was bigger than it looked from outside, with a large main room that served as kitchen and living space, 3 bedrooms, and a small room that had clearly been Molly's sewing room. It was clean but cluttered with the kind of chaos that came from 2 males living without feminine oversight. Dishes were stacked by the sink, newspapers were scattered across the table, and there were mud tracks across the floor that made Helena wince. "It is not usually quite this bad," Betty said apologetically. "I try to keep up with it, but with my own 3 and another on the way." She patted her slightly rounded belly. "I just cannot manage both places." "When are you due?" Helena asked. "February. Luke is hoping for another boy, but I am praying for a girl this time." Betty showed her the bedroom that would be hers if she stayed, a sunny room with a bed, a dresser, and a window that looked out toward the mountains. Molly's room. She would be glad to know someone was using it. Helena walked to the window, looking out at the ranch spread before her. She could see Graham and Tommy in the corral, the boy sitting on the fence while Graham worked with a beautiful gray horse. The animal was clearly green, dancing sideways and tossing its head, but Graham's movements were patient and steady. He talked to the horse in a voice too low for Helena to hear, but she could see the effect, the way the animal gradually calmed and began to respond. "He is good with them," Betty said, coming to stand beside her. "Horses and children both. He has raised Tommy like his own, and that boy loves him fiercer than anything. But it has been hard on Graham, doing it all alone. He deserves some help, some happiness." There was something in Betty's tone that made Helena glance at her sharply, but the other woman's face was innocent. Still, Helena got the distinct impression that Betty was already matchmaking in her mind, and the thought made her both nervous and strangely warm. "I should change," Helena said, picking up the bundle Graham had given her. "Where can I?" "Use Molly's room, that will be yours anyway." "I will get started on some lunch. You will stay and eat with us, will you not?" Helena changed into Molly's clothes, which fit surprisingly well. The split skirt was practical and comfortable, and the boots, though a bit worn, were good quality. She looked at herself in the small mirror over the dresser and barely recognized the woman looking back. She looked like she belonged here, like someone who lived and worked on a western ranch. When she came back to the kitchen, Betty was mixing biscuit dough and had put a pot of soup on the stove. Without being asked, Helena began cleaning up the accumulated dishes. They worked in comfortable silence, the kind that came naturally between women used to hard work. By the time Graham and Tommy came in for lunch, the kitchen was spotless and the table was set. Tommy's eyes widened. "It looks like when Aunt Molly was here." Graham's expression was harder to read, but Helena thought she saw approval and something else, something that made her cheeks warm. "You did not have to do all this, Miss Owens. You have not even decided if you are staying yet." "I wanted to see what the work would be like," Helena said, ladling soup into bowls. "And please call me Helena. Miss Owens makes me feel like a schoolmarm." "You were going to be a schoolmarm," Tommy pointed out around a mouthful of biscuit. "Still might be," Helena replied. "But for now, I am just Helena." Over lunch, Graham explained more about what the position would entail. Housework and cooking, certainly, but also helping with the garden, preserving food for winter, and teaching Tommy his lessons. In return, she would have her own room, all her meals, $20 a month, and Sundays off to attend church or do as she pleased. "There is a small community about 3 miles north," Graham said. "Good folks. We have a church service every Sunday and social gatherings pretty regular. You would not be isolated out here." "What about propriety?" Helena asked bluntly. "I know Mrs. Patterson vouched for you, but people will talk about an unmarried woman living on a ranch with an unmarried man." Graham looked uncomfortable. "I thought about that. Betty and Luke live in the foreman's house about a quarter-mile down the road. Betty could stay here at night if that would make you feel better, or we could put it about that you are a distant cousin come to help with Tommy." "Nobody would believe that," Betty interjected. "Graham, you know everyone in this valley knows your family tree back 3 generations. But if Miss Helena sleeps in Molly's room at this end of the house, and you stay in yours at the other end with Tommy between you, and if she is seen at church every Sunday acting respectable, people will accept it. They know you need help, and they know you are an honorable man." "I am not worried about my reputation," Graham said quietly. "I am worried about yours, Helena. You should not have to suffer gossip because I need help on my ranch." The fact that he cared, that he had even thought about it, told Helena more about Graham Vance's character than any number of recommendations could have. She made her decision. "I will stay," she said, "for 3 months through December. That will give me time to save enough money to continue to Oregon, and it will give you time to find someone more permanent." She saw something flicker in Graham's eyes, something that might have been disappointment, but he nodded. "3 months then. When can you start?" "Tomorrow," if that suits you. I will need to collect my trunk from Mrs. Patterson's and settle my account there. I will take you back to town this afternoon, Graham offered. We can get your things and be back before supper. After lunch, Betty headed home and Tommy begged to come along to town, so the three of them climbed into the wagon for the return journey. Tommy sat between them, chattering about the horses and the traps he had set for rabbits and the swimming hole in the river where the water was still warm enough for one more swim before winter. "You like horses, Miss Helena?" he asked. "I do, though I have not ridden in a while. Uncle Graham can teach you better. He is the best rider in the whole territory, maybe the whole world. He can ride anything, even that crazy Mustang that bit Mr. Peterson's thumb clean off." "The Mustang did not bite his thumb off," Graham corrected. "It bit his thumb and he had to have it amputated because it got infected. There is a difference." "Still sounds pretty impressive," Helena said, hiding a smile. At the boarding house, Mrs. Patterson was delighted to hear that Helena had accepted the position. "I knew you two would suit," she said, with the satisfied air of someone whose matchmaking had worked out. "Graham, you take care of this young lady. Helena, you come to me if you need anything at all, you hear." They loaded Helena's trunk into the wagon bed and she paid Mrs. Patterson for the single night, though the woman tried to refuse payment. As they were leaving, a man in a fine suit and bowler hat stepped out of the bank and directly into their path. "Vance," he said coldly, "still scraping by on that hardscrabble ranch." Graham's expression did not change, but Helena felt him tense beside her. "Mr. Thornton, nice to see you too. I heard your sister finally had the good sense to leave. Maybe now you will reconsider my offer. I would give you a fair price for the land. As I have told you every month for the past 2 years, the ranch is not for sale." Thornton's eyes slid over to Helena, assessing her in a way that made her skin crawl. "And who is this? Already found a replacement for Molly." "This is Miss Owens. She is helping with the household," Graham said shortly. "Now if you will excuse us." He clicked to the horses and they moved forward, forcing Thornton to step aside. Once they were out of earshot, Tommy said, "I do not like Mr. Thornton. He is mean." "Mr. Thornton owns most of the timber land north of town," Graham explained to Helena. "He has been trying to buy up smaller ranches to expand his operations. He is convinced I will eventually fail and sell to him." "Will you?" Helena asked. Graham's jaw set. "Not while I have breath in my body. My father built that ranch and it is Tommy's inheritance. I will make it work even if it kills me." The vehemence in his voice startled her, but she understood it. This was not just about land or money. This was about family, legacy, and refusing to give up in the face of pressure. It was about staying true to yourself no matter what. Back at the ranch, Helena carried her trunk into Molly's room and began unpacking properly. She had 2 more dresses, her teaching supplies, a few treasured books, her mother's jewelry box, and at the bottom of the trunk, wrapped in tissue paper, her wedding dress. She had made it 3 years ago when she was engaged to Daniel Harrison, a bank clerk from her hometown. But Daniel had died of cholera 6 months before the wedding, and Helena had packed away the dress along with her dreams of marriage and family. She ran her fingers over the white cotton, then carefully wrapped it back up and placed it in the bottom drawer of the dresser. That life was gone. This was her life now, at least for the next 3 months. She changed back into her own dress and went to the kitchen to start supper. Graham had a fair supply of basics: flour, salt, sugar, dried beans, and a good vegetable garden behind the house. Helena found potatoes, carrots, and late squash, and made a hearty stew with some salted beef. She mixed up cornbread and put it in the oven, then set about thoroughly cleaning the kitchen while everything cooked. When Graham and Tommy came in at sunset, Both dirty and tired from a day's work, the house smelled like home. Helena saw Graham stop in the doorway, saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. "I cannot remember the last time this place smelled like this," he said quietly. Over supper, Tommy told Helena stories about the ranch, the horses, his friends at school, and his dreams of becoming a rancher like his uncle. Graham added details here and there, but mostly he just watched them both with an expression Helena could not quite read. After the dishes were done and Tommy was sent to wash up for bed, Graham walked Helena out to the porch. The sun had set fully now, and the stars were coming out in a profusion she had never seen back east. The air was cool and smelled of pine and wood smoke. "Thank you," Graham said, "for staying, for giving this a chance. I know it is not what you planned." "Nothing in the past week has been what I planned," Helena replied, "but maybe that is all right. Maybe sometimes the wrong train takes you to the right place." Graham smiled, and in the starlight she thought he looked younger, less burdened. Or maybe fate just knew what it was doing all along. He bid her good night and went inside to put Tommy to bed. Helena stayed on the porch a while longer, listening to the night sounds of the ranch, the soft nickering of horses, the distant call of an owl, and the whisper of wind through the pines. She had been in Centralia for less than 2 days, and already it felt more like home than Chicago ever had. That thought should have frightened her. Instead, it filled her with a quiet, steady hope. The next weeks fell into a rhythm that surprised Helena with its comfort. She woke early, made breakfast for the 3 of them, then spent the morning doing housework while Graham and Tommy worked the ranch. Afternoons were for Tommy's lessons, and Helena discovered that the boy was indeed sharp as a tack, soaking up reading and arithmetic like a sponge. After lessons, she would work in the garden or preserve food for the coming winter, and Graham would often join her, helping with the heavy work. Evenings were her favorite time. After supper, they would sit in the main room, Graham mending tack or working on accounts while she sewed or read aloud. Tommy would play with his toy horses until his eyes grew heavy, and then Graham would carry him off to bed. Those quiet hours felt like a family, and Helena had to keep reminding herself that this was temporary, that come December, she would be leaving for Oregon. But as the days shortened and October arrived, bringing gold to the aspen trees and frost to the mornings, Helena found herself thinking about Oregon less and less. She thought instead about the way Graham smiled when he came in to find fresh bread cooling on the counter. She thought about Tommy's fierce hug when she helped him sound out a particularly difficult word. She thought about the way the mountains looked at sunset, and the sound of Graham's voice talking softly to his horses, and the feeling of belonging that had settled into her bones. She was falling in love with this place, and if she was honest with herself, she was falling in love with Graham Vance too. It happened gradually, like the changing of seasons. It was in the way he always made sure she had the most comfortable chair by the fire. The way he noticed when she was tired and would take over her chores without being asked. The way he listened when she talked about her life before, her family, her dreams, and actually remembered the details days later. One Saturday in mid-October, Graham suggested they all go into town for supplies. They made a day of it, stopping at the general store where Helena bought fabric to make Tommy a new winter coat, then at the post office where she had a letter waiting from her cousin in Oregon. They had lunch at a small restaurant, and several people stopped by the table to greet Graham and be introduced to Helena. Everyone was friendly and welcoming, and if some of them looked at her and Graham with speculative interest, no one said anything improper. On the way home, Tommy fell asleep in the back of the wagon, worn out from the excitement of town. Graham and Helena sat side by side on the bench seat, comfortable in the silence. You have not mentioned Oregon in a while, Graham said eventually. Helena had been watching the scenery, but she turned to look at him. I got a letter from my cousin today. She said they hired someone else for the teaching position. They could not wait any longer. I am sorry, Graham said, and sounded like he meant it. I know that was what you planned. Plans change, Helena said. To be honest, I am not as disappointed as I thought I would be. I like it here, Graham. I like the ranch, the town, the people. I like teaching Tommy, I like. She trailed off, not quite brave enough to finish the sentence. I am glad you like it here, Graham said, his voice low, because I have been trying to figure out how to ask you to stay beyond December. Helena's heart kicked hard against her ribs. You have. Helena, this ranch has not felt like a home since my mother died. It has just been a place Tommy and I lived while we worked ourselves half to death. But you have made it a home again. The place is cleaner, the food is better, Tommy is thriving with your teaching, but it is more than that. He took a breath, his hands tightening on the reins. You make me remember that there is more to life than just surviving. You make me want to build something, not just for Tommy's future, but for my own. Graham, Helena said, her voice barely above a whisper. I am not asking you for anything you are not ready to give, he said quickly. If you want to stay on as housekeeper, same arrangement as now, I would be grateful. But if you wanted more, if you thought maybe you could see a future here that included more than just work, I would like that even better. Helena knew what he was asking, even if he was not saying it directly. He was asking if she could see herself staying permanently, if she could see herself as more than just an employee, if she could see herself as his wife. I need to think, she said, and saw him nod, though she also saw the flash of disappointment he tried to hide. Not because I do not know how I feel, but because this is important. It is the rest of our lives, Graham. That deserves more than a decision made in the moment. You are right, he said. Take all the time you need. Just know that whatever you decide, you have a place here as long as you want it. That night, Helena lay in bed and stared at the ceiling, her mind spinning. She cared for Graham more than cared if she was honest. She loved the way he was with Tommy, patient and firm and kind. She loved his quiet strength, his dry humor, his work-hardened hands that could be so gentle with a skittish horse or a child's hurt feelings. She loved the life they had built in these few short weeks, but love was not always enough. She had loved Daniel, and death had taken him. She had loved her father, and overwork had killed him. She had learned that loving someone meant risking the kind of loss that could break you. Was she brave enough to risk that again? The answer came not in that moment, but 3 days later. Graham had gone to check on his cattle in the high pasture and had not come home by dark. Tommy was trying to be brave, but Helena could see the fear in his eyes as they waited by the window. He is fine, she kept saying. He probably just got delayed. He will be home soon. But as the hours stretched on and full darkness fell, Helena's own fear grew. She made Tommy eat some supper, then let him stay up past his bedtime, both of them watching the road. Finally, near 10 o'clock, they heard hoofbeats. Graham came through the door pale and limping, blood soaking through his trouser leg. Tommy gave a cry and ran to him, and Helena was right behind, her heart in her throat. It is not bad, Graham said, even as he swayed on his feet. Just a stupid accident. My horse spooked at a rattlesnake, threw me into some rocks, gashed my leg pretty good, but I have had worse. Helena and Tommy helped him to a chair, and Helena cut away his trouser leg to reveal a deep cut on his thigh. It was still bleeding sluggishly and would definitely need stitches. Her nursing instincts, learned from helping her mother care for neighbors back home, took over. Tommy, fetch me the whiskey from the cupboard, then heat some water, she ordered. Graham, you are going to need stitches. I can do it, but it will hurt. "Do what you need to do," he said through gritted teeth. She cleaned the wound, grateful that it was not as deep as it could have been, though it was still serious. Graham drank some whiskey, then gripped the arms of the chair while she stitched with careful, practiced movements. He did not cry out, though she saw sweat bead on his forehead, and when she was done, he looked at her with something like awe. "Where did you learn to do that?" "My mother was the closest thing our town had to a doctor for years," Helena said, wrapping his leg in clean bandages. "I learned from her. You are lucky, Graham. If that cut had been any deeper, you could have bled to death up there." The reality of those words hit her like a physical blow. He could have died. She could have lost him before she ever told him how she felt. After she sent Tommy to bed and got Graham settled on the settee with his leg elevated, she sat down beside him. The lamp cast soft shadows across his face, and she could see the exhaustion there, the pain he was trying to hide. "You scared me tonight," she said quietly. "I scared myself," he admitted. "All I could think about as I was trying to get back here was that I might not make it, that Tommy would lose another person he loved, that you would leave, because why would you stay on a ranch where the owner was too careless to watch for snakes?" "Graham Vance, you listen to me," Helena said fiercely. "What happened tonight was an accident, not carelessness, and I am not going anywhere." He turned his head to look at her fully. "You are staying. Past December, I am staying forever if you will have me." The words came out in a rush, all the fears and doubts swept away by the simple, terrifying truth of how much she loved this man. "I love you, Graham. I think I have been falling in love with you since that first day on the train platform when you told me maybe fate brought me to the right man. I was just too afraid to admit it." Graham reached out and took her hand, his grip strong despite his injury. "You love me. I love you," she repeated, more certainly this time. "I love your kindness and your strength, and the way you have built a home for Tommy, even when you were grieving yourself. I love the way you talk to your horses and the way you listen when I read. I love the life we have here, and I want to keep building it with you." "Helena," he said, and pulled her closer. "I have been in love with you since you told Tommy you could make 7 kinds of pie. Maybe before that, maybe from the moment I saw you sitting on that trunk looking lost and brave all at once. I did not know how to tell you, did not know if you could ever feel the same way about a broken-down rancher with more debts than sense." "You are not broken down," she said, cupping his face with her free hand. "You are the strongest man I have ever known." He kissed her then, soft and sweet and full of promise. It was Helena's first real kiss, and it felt like coming home and setting out on adventure all at the same time. When they finally pulled apart, both breathless, Graham rested his forehead against hers. "Marry me," he said. "Not because it is practical or proper, but because I cannot imagine my life without you in it. Marry me, Helena Owens, and let me spend the rest of my days trying to make you as happy as you have made me." "Yes," she said and kissed him again. "Yes, I will marry you." They stayed like that for a long time, holding each other in the lamplight, making quiet plans for a future that now stretched out bright and certain before them. Finally, Helena insisted that Graham needed rest, and she helped him to his room. As she turned to leave, he caught her hand. "Thank you," he said, "for saying yes, for staying, for choosing this life, for choosing me." "Thank you for being someone worth choosing," she replied. "Now rest, doctor's orders." She went to her own room and lay in bed, too excited to sleep. She was going to marry Graham Vance. She was going to stay here on this ranch and build a life with him and Tommy. The wrong train had brought her to exactly the right place. The next morning, despite his injury, Graham was up early and insisting he had work to do. Helena put her foot down. "You are staying off that leg for at least 3 days," she said firmly. "Luke can handle the horses and I can manage the feeding. You are going to sit right here and let yourself heal." Tommy, who had been ecstatic to learn at breakfast that Helena was going to marry his uncle and become his aunt officially, piped up. "You better listen to her, Uncle Graham. She is going to be in charge soon." "I think she is already in charge," Graham said, but he was smiling as he settled back into his chair. Luke Crawford came by later that morning, and when Graham told him the news, the ranch hand's weathered face split into a huge grin. "Well, it is about time. Betty has been saying for weeks that you two were circling each other like nervous colts. She is going to be unbearable with the smug when I tell her she was right." Over the next few days, as Graham healed, they made their plans. They would marry in December, at the community church with everyone invited. Betty threw herself into helping Helena prepare, teaching her the finer points of ranching life and sharing stories about Graham's family. Tommy took his new role as nephew, soon-to-be son, very seriously, helping Helena with everything and telling anyone who would listen that he was getting a new aunt who made the best pie in Washington Territory. The community embraced their engagement warmly. The neighboring ranchers all knew Graham and respected him, and they were happy to see him finding happiness after so many hard years. Even the ladies at church, who might have been scandalized by the unconventional way Helena and Graham had met, approved of the match. The only person who was not happy was Thornton. He stopped by the ranch one afternoon in late October, ostensibly to congratulate them, but his true intentions became clear quickly. "Marriage is expensive, Vance," he said, sitting uninvited at their table while Helena served coffee. "More mouths to feed, more responsibilities. If you are smart, you will sell now while you still can and take a job working for me. I would pay you fair wages, and you would not have to worry about losing everything when the bank calls in your loans." Graham's face went hard. "I do not have any loans with the bank, Thornton. My land is paid for, has been since my father's time. Times change. Accidents happen. It would be a shame if something went wrong and you could not keep up your tax payments, or if there was a problem with your water rights." Thornton smiled, but there was nothing friendly in it. "I am just saying, sell now and you will have money to give your new bride a proper start." "I think you should leave," Helena said coldly. "Graham has told you repeatedly that the ranch is not for sale. Perhaps you should listen." Thornton's eyes narrowed. "You should teach your woman better manners, Vance." Graham stood up so fast his chair fell over backward. "You need to leave my property right now, Thornton, before I forget myself and do something I will regret." The timber baron left, but his parting words were ominous. "You will regret not selling when you had the chance." After he was gone, Graham paced the kitchen like a caged animal. "That man has been a thorn in my side for 2 years. He wants this land because the railroad is talking about putting a spur line through here, and he thinks he can make a fortune selling timber if he controls all the land on this side of the valley. Can he actually cause problems with taxes or water rights?" Helena asked worriedly. "He can try, but the water rights were established by my father and filed properly. As for taxes, I have always paid on time, but Thornton has money and influence and that counts for a lot." Graham stopped pacing and looked at her. "Helena, I will understand if you want to reconsider. I do not want to drag you into a fight." Helena stood up and went to him, taking both his hands. "Graham Vance, I am marrying you. That means your fights are my fights. We will face whatever comes together." He pulled her into his arms and held her tight. "How did I get so lucky?" "You offered a lost woman a job," she said against his chest. "Best decision you ever made." "Second best," he corrected. "The best was asking you to marry me." November came in cold and clear, and Helena threw herself into preparing for winter and for the wedding. She sewed her wedding dress with Betty's help. a simple but beautiful creation in cream-colored wool that would be practical for a winter ceremony. She learned to preserve the last of the garden vegetables, to smoke meat, to prepare for the long months when snow would make trips to town difficult. She also learned more about running the ranch. Graham taught her about the horses, which ones were ready to sell, which needed more training, which were being kept for breeding. He took her out to see the cattle in the high pasture, and they spent a day riding the property lines, Graham showing her every corner of the land his father had claimed. "This will be yours too," he said, as they sat on a ridge overlooking the valley. "Yours and Tommy's and our children's, if we are blessed with any." The thought of children, of babies with Graham's dark eyes and her auburn hair, made Helena's heart ache with longing. "I would like that. A big family if we can manage it." "However many we have, they will be loved," Graham said and kissed her temple. The wedding was set for December 15th, and as the day approached, Helena found herself both excited and nervous. She had written to her family back in Illinois, and her mother and younger sister sent letters full of joy and good wishes, though they could not afford the journey west for the wedding. Her older brother, who had taken over the family farm, sent a stern letter asking if she was certain about marrying a man she had known for less than 3 months, but even he ended with congratulations and hopes for her happiness. 3 days before the wedding, heavy snow began to fall. It snowed for 2 days straight, blanketing the ranch in white and making travel impossible. Helena worried that no one would be able to attend the ceremony, but on the morning of the wedding, the snow stopped and the sun came out, turning everything into a glittering wonderland. Betty and Luke brought their children over early to help prepare. The community had decided to hold the wedding and reception at the ranch since it was too dangerous for everyone to travel to the church. Neighbors began arriving on horseback and in wagons, bringing food and good wishes. Someone brought a fiddle, someone else brought a guitar, and by noon the ranch house was full of people and laughter and music. Helena dressed in Molly's old room with Betty's help, her hands shaking as she buttoned the cream wool dress. She had woven some dried lavender and sage into her braided hair, and Betty declared she looked beautiful. "Graham is not going to be able to take his eyes off you," Betty said, adjusting Helena's collar. "That man has been in love with you since September, but I swear he falls deeper every single day." "I feel the same," Helena admitted. "Sometimes I wake up afraid this is all a dream, that I will find myself back on that train still heading toward the wrong place." "This is exactly the right place," Betty said firmly. "You were meant to be here, Helena. Anyone with eyes can see that." The ceremony was held in the main room, with everyone crowded in and spilling out onto the porch despite the cold. The preacher from the community church had made the journey, and he stood before the fireplace waiting. Graham stood beside him in his best suit, his hair combed back and his face serious. Tommy stood next to him in a new shirt Helena had made, holding the wedding ring and looking very important. Luke walked Helena down the makeshift aisle, and when Graham saw her, his whole face lit up with such joy that she thought she might cry right there. She made it to his side without tripping, and he took her hands in his grip warm and steady. The preacher said the words that would bind them together, but Helena barely heard them. She was too focused on Graham's face, on the promise she saw there, on the future they were creating with these vows. When the preacher asked if she took Graham to be her husband, she said, "I do," in a voice that rang clear and certain through the room. Graham's voice was equally steady when he made his vows. "I do, now and forever." Tommy handed over the ring, which had been Graham's mother's, and Helena slipped it onto her finger. It fit perfectly, as if it had been made for her. Then Graham produced a ring of his own, a simple gold band he had ordered from town, and placed it on her finger alongside his mother's ring. "I now pronounce you husband and wife," the preacher said with a smile. "Graham, you may kiss your bride." Graham cupped her face in his hands and kissed her gently, sweetly, with all the love he had been holding back. The room erupted in cheers and applause, and when they broke apart, both of them were smiling so wide their faces hurt. The celebration lasted well into the night. There was food and dancing and toasts to the happy couple. Tommy fell asleep on a pile of coats in the corner, worn out from excitement. Neighbors shared stories about Graham's parents and about the early days of the ranch, making Helena feel even more connected to this land and this community. Late in the evening, when things were finally winding down and guests were preparing to head home, Thornton appeared in the doorway. He was not invited and clearly not welcome, but he stood there anyway, surveying the scene with cold eyes. "Congratulations, Vance," he said. "Enjoy your happiness while it lasts. I have filed a claim with the territorial court arguing that your father's original land grant was improperly surveyed. The case will be heard in Olympia in March. If I win, this ranch reverts to public land and I have first rights to purchase it." The room went silent. Graham handed Helena his cup of cider and walked slowly toward Thornton, his face dark with anger. "You have no case." "My father's claim was properly filed and surveyed by the territorial government. We will let the court decide that," Thornton said with a smile. "Of course, you will have to travel to Olympia and hire a lawyer, which I know you cannot afford. Or you could save us all the trouble and sell to me now. I am feeling generous, it being your wedding day and all. I will give you fair market value and even throw in a job at the mill." "Get off my land," Graham said quietly. "It might not be your land much longer," Thornton replied, but he left, leaving a wake of unease behind him. The guests rallied around Graham and Helena, assuring them that Thornton was bluffing, that he had no case, that everything would be fine. But Helena could see the worry in Graham's eyes, and her heart ached for him. On what should have been the happiest night of his life, Thornton had cast a shadow over everything. After everyone left and they had put an exhausted Tommy to bed, Graham and Helena sat by the fire, her in her wedding dress and him in his suit, both too tired to change but not ready to sleep. "I am sorry," Graham said. "I never wanted to bring you into this fight." "Stop apologizing," Helena said firmly. "I am your wife now, Graham. That means we face everything together, remember?" He pulled her close and she rested her head on his shoulder. "What are we going to do? We are going to fight," she said. "We will find a way to get to Olympia, we will hire a lawyer, and we will prove that Thornton is lying. This ranch belongs to you, to us, to Tommy. We are not going to let him take it." "I love you," Graham said fiercely. "I love you so much it scares me sometimes." "I love you too," she replied. "And together we are stronger than we are apart. We will get through this." They sat like that until the fire burned low, holding each other, drawing strength from each other. Finally, Graham stood and offered her his hand. "Come on, Mrs. Vance. It has been a long day and we both need rest." She took his hand and let him lead her to the bedroom, the one that had been his alone but was now theirs. They helped each other out of their wedding clothes, the nervousness Helena had expected replaced by something deeper, a certainty that this was right. They lay down together in the bed, Graham's arms around her, and for the first time in her life, Helena felt completely safe, completely loved, completely home. The next morning, reality returned. Graham and Luke had to break ice on the water troughs, and Helena had to figure out how to make breakfast for a family instead of just herself. Tommy woke up full of energy and questions about what it meant now that Helena was officially his aunt. Over the next weeks, as Christmas approached, Graham worked on gathering documentation to prove his land claim was legitimate. He dug out his father's original papers, the survey documents, the tax receipts going back 20 years. Helena helped him organize everything, writing letters to the Territorial Land Office and to lawyers in Olympia trying to find someone who would take their case. Money was tight. Graham sold 2 of his best horses, animals he had been planning to keep for breeding, to raise funds for the lawyer. It hurt him to do it, Helena could see, but he did what needed to be done. Christmas came, and despite their worries, they made it special for Tommy. Helena baked pies and cookies, and Graham brought in a small pine tree that they decorated with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments Tommy made. On Christmas morning, Tommy opened his presents. A new coat Helena had made, a pocket knife from Graham, and a book of adventure stories they had ordered from the general store. "This is the best Christmas ever," Tommy declared. "Because you are here, Aunt Helena, and we are a real family now." Helena hugged him tight, blinking back tears. "We are definitely a real family." January brought deep cold and heavy snows. They were mostly housebound, which gave Graham plenty of time to work on his case. He found a lawyer in Olympia named Samuel Wright, who agreed to take the case for a reduced fee, believing that Thornton was abusing the legal system to steal land from smaller holders. Wright sent detailed questions about the original claim, and Graham spent hours writing responses by lamplight while Helena helped, her neat handwriting transcribing his words. In February, the snow began to melt and the first signs of spring appeared. Graham would have to travel to Olympia in mid-March for the hearing, a journey that would take at least a week each way given the condition of the roads. Helena insisted on going with him, but Graham was reluctant. "It is too hard a journey," he said. "The roads will be mud, we will have to camp rough most nights, and I do not want you in Olympia when I do not know what Thornton might try." "I am going," Helena said flatly. "You need me there, Graham. You need someone to keep your spirits up, to help organize your papers, to remind you that you are fighting for something important. And besides, I am your wife. Where you go, I go." They compromised. Tommy would stay with Betty and Luke, and Helena would travel with Graham to Olympia. They left in early March, the wagon packed with supplies and all of Graham's documentation. The journey was every bit as difficult as Graham had predicted, the roads muddy and rutted, the weather unpredictable. But they also found beauty in it, camping under the stars and talking late into the night, learning even more about each other. Olympia was a bustling town, the territorial capital, far bigger than Centralia. They stayed in a modest hotel near the courthouse, and Graham met with his lawyer several times to prepare. Samuel Wright was a sharp-eyed man in his 40s, and he was confident about their case. "Thornton is claiming the survey was improperly done, but I have obtained the original surveyor's notes and they are meticulous," Wright explained. "He also claims your father did not fulfill the improvement requirements, but your tax records and witness testimony will prove otherwise. This is a nuisance suit designed to intimidate you into selling. The judge will see that." The hearing was held on March 16, 1884, in a courtroom that smelled of wood polish and old paper. Thornton was there with 2 lawyers in expensive suits, and he stared at Graham and Helena with cold triumph. But Graham sat straight and calm, Helena's hand in his, and when he was called to testify, he spoke clearly and honestly about his father's work, his own 20 years of labor on the land, and the improvements they had made. Helena testified, too, about the condition of the property when she arrived, about the records Graham had kept, about the life they were building. She looked directly at the judge as she spoke, and she saw him nodding. Thornton's lawyers tried to poke holes in the story, but Wright demolished their arguments with documentation and logic. The surveyor who had done the original work was still alive, and he testified that his work had been thorough and accurate. Neighbors from Centralia had made the journey to testify about the Vance family's character and hard work. By the end of the day, even Thornton looked worried. The judge took all the evidence under advisement and said he would issue a ruling within the week. Graham and Helena returned to their hotel exhausted but hopeful. 3 days later, the ruling came. The judge found in favor of Graham Vance, declaring that the land claim was legitimate and properly filed, and that Thornton's suit was without merit. Furthermore, the judge warned Thornton that any further attempts to use the courts to harass legitimate landholders would result in sanctions. Graham read the ruling 3 times before he believed it, and then he swept Helena into his arms and spun her around right there in the hotel lobby. "We won. Helena, we won. I never doubted we would," she said, laughing and crying at the same time. "That land is yours, ours. Thornton cannot take it from us." They celebrated that night with a nice dinner at the hotel restaurant, and then they began the journey home. The trip back seemed shorter somehow, the mud less bothersome, the weather more forgiving. They talked about the future, about expanding the horse herd, about maybe buying some of the adjacent land that was coming available, about the children they hoped to have. When they finally arrived home, Tommy ran out to meet them, shouting the news that one of the mares had foaled early and they had a beautiful new colt. Life on the ranch resumed its rhythm, but with a new lightness. The threat that had hung over them since December was gone, and they could finally just live. Spring turned into summer, and Helena discovered she was pregnant. Graham was overjoyed, treating her like precious glass until she told him firmly that she was not an invalid and intended to keep working. Tommy was excited about becoming a big cousin, and he took his role very seriously, helping Helena more than ever. In October, nearly a year after she had arrived in Centralia, Helena gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him James after Graham's brother, and when Graham held his son for the first time, Helena saw tears in his eyes. "Thank you," he whispered. "Thank you for giving me this, for giving us this." "We made him together," Helena replied tiredly. "He is ours." Tommy adored his little cousin, helping to care for him and telling anyone who would listen that he was going to teach James everything about horses when he got bigger. The ranch prospered, Graham's reputation as a horse breeder grew, and they began to see real financial success. 2 years later, Helena gave birth to a daughter they named Abigail, after Helena's mother. She had Helena's auburn hair and Graham's dark eyes, and she was the joy of everyone's life. Tommy, now 12 and growing tall, was just as gentle with his cousin as he had been with James. Life was not without challenges. There were hard winters and dry summers, horses that got sick and cattle that wandered off. But they faced everything together, Graham and Helena, partners in work and life and love. On a warm evening in September 1887, exactly 4 years after Helena had arrived on the wrong train, she and Graham sat on the porch watching Tommy teaching James how to feed the horses while Betty held baby Abigail. The sun was setting over the mountains, painting the sky in shades of gold and pink. "You ever wonder what your life would have been like if you had gotten on the right train?" Graham asked, his arm around her shoulders. Helena leaned into him, breathing in the familiar scent of horses and leather and the man she loved more than anything. "No, because this is the right life, Graham. This was always the right life, I just did not know it yet." "The train brought you to the wrong town," Graham said, repeating the words he had said that first day. "And you told me maybe fate brought me to the right man," Helena finished. "You were right. Fate knew exactly what it was doing. They sat like that as the stars came out, surrounded by the life they had built from an accidental meeting and a leap of faith. Helena thought about that scared young woman on the train platform, lost and alone, and she wished she could tell her that everything was going to be more than all right. That the wrong turn would lead to the right destination. That love was worth the risk, always. The years continued to roll by, bringing more children, 2 more sons and another daughter, until their home was filled with laughter and chaos and love. Tommy grew up and eventually married a girl from town, building his own house on the far side of the ranch property and working the land alongside Graham. James showed his father's gift with horses, while Abigail had her mother's way with words and numbers. Graham's hair started to gray at the temples, and Helena found laugh lines around her eyes when she looked in the mirror, but they wore their age with grace and gratitude. Every year on September 23rd, the anniversary of the day Helena had arrived in Centralia, they would sit on the porch and remember that first meeting, that first moment when fate had intervened. When they were old and their children were grown with families of their own, Graham and Helena would walk through the ranch, past the barn that had been expanded twice, past the paddocks full of fine horses, past the garden where Helena still grew vegetables every summer. They would stop at the ridge where Graham had once shown her the valley and told her it would be hers too. No regrets, Graham would ask, as he had asked so many times over the years. Not a single one, Helena would answer, and mean it with every fiber of her being. She had boarded the wrong train all those years ago, had ended up in a town she had never heard of with no money and no plan. But that wrong turn had led her to a life richer than anything she could have imagined. It had led her to Graham, to their children, to this land that had become as much a part of her as her own heartbeat. The train had brought her to the wrong town, but Graham had been right from the very beginning. Fate had brought her to exactly the right man, at exactly the right time, to build exactly the right life. And that was worth more than any plan she could have made. As the sun set on another day, another year, another chapter of their long life together, Helena and Graham walked back to the house hand in hand, the way they had walked through everything together. The porch light was on, lit by one of their daughters-in-law, welcoming them home. There was the sound of grandchildren playing inside, of life continuing, of legacy being built. Helena had once thought she knew where her life was supposed to go. She had been wrong, and she had never been more grateful for being wrong in her entire life. Sometimes the best things in life come not from careful plans but from accidents, wrong turns, and the courage to see where an unexpected path might lead. The wrong train had brought her to Centralia, Washington Territory. And a cowboy named Graham Vance had shown her that sometimes, just sometimes, getting lost is the only way to truly find yourself, find home, and find a love that lasts a lifetime and beyond.